Welcome to Know Your Candidate podcast. This is an opportunity for candidates from across Tauranga City wards to tell their stories, their experiences, their reasonings in their own words. A format which gives them more than the public debates and profiles that you've seen already. An opportunity for the voter, the ratepayer, future resident to get to know who you want leading the city and, importantly, are they capable of doing so? Anne Pankhurst, a previous business owner, councillor and political junkie, will find out more why the candidates want to run, where they have come from, what they're going to do. So let's not wait anymore. Let's go.
Hi, we're here with Andrew Caie who is standing in the Te Papa ward. Andrew, welcome to Know Your Candidate podcast series.
Thank you, Anne.
Our format today is to take the opportunity for a longer, more conversational approach so that you, the candidate, can speak in a more conversational way and share your own aspirations for the city. We'll take about 20 to 30 minutes answering pre-prepared questions, which you have no idea what they are. But the most important aspect of this election is that you vote and that you encourage everyone to vote, particularly in your demographic, which is relatively young and who don't always vote. Democracy works when we all engage, actively take part, learn about our candidates, and understand what is important for us for the future of the city. So remember to send this through all of your databases and channels and to follow us on Know Your Candidate series on the podhub.com. So, Andrew, can you give us a very brief rundown on yourself, the who are you, children, no children, what you have done in the past, and give us that brief bio on yourself?
Well, I'm a physiotherapist by trade. I grew up in Tauranga. Did my schooling in Bethlehem College, went to university in Auckland, and then spent most of my working career in Melbourne, mostly in the rest homes over there, where I worked my way up to being a regional manager. And then I moved back here after my son was born, and been here running my own business successfully in Tauranga.
Right, thank you for that. Have you had any experience in governance roles? And if so, roughly, what were the budgets that you were working with inside of that?
Not specifically governance, but more on the managerial side. As the regional manager of the rest home, I was dealing in budgets in the tens of millions, not quite as much as I will be for Tauranga City Council, but I'm not afraid of large numbers. And on the governance side, I've been involved in writing policy for various organizations that I've worked for.
So what is your experience of working with TCC? Have you had any? Have you worked with them or for them?
Not specifically working for TCC. I've been involved in a lot of the consultation processes, giving my feedback on the current long-term plan. But I have had workings with the Wyndham City Council over in Melbourne, so I have understanding of the workings of council.
Okay, so next question. What do you consider the main role of the mayor and councillors of a city to be?
Well, I ultimately consider them to be representatives of the city, kind of a conduit for the feedback of the community and ultimately decision makers for the city using that feedback to mostly through the long-term plan, formulate a plan for the city that the council can enact.
Right. So the skill set that I'd really love to drill down on is the ability and experience in managing complex commercial and political environments. What do you consider that? Do you have the skill, and what is that ability, and what do you consider them to be?
Well, it's really about relationships. A lot of the high-level stuff is about formulating the right relationships with key people, so that you can ultimately formulate plans that everyone can agree on and successfully be implemented. Sorry, can I quite catch the question again?
So I'm just asking for what kind of ability and experience you have in managing complex commercial and political environment. It sounds like you've got quite good commercial capability.
Yeah, on the political side, I did campaign for TOP in 2020. And so there is, I suppose, organizing the campaign on the political side. But as for political actions and decision makings, not so much yet. Something that I'm looking forward to getting more experience in.
Right. Now, if funding for for the huge infrastructure spend is one of the key and biggest issues facing the city. What would one of or several of your solutions be for that?
Look, well, we can't rely on endlessly putting up the rates burden on our citizens. I mean, they just simply can't handle it. I believe there are other avenues for funding the development and growth of the city. I do believe that the developers can pay a more fair share of contribution of development costs of growth. And I also think that we really need to partner with central government. There are a lot of other regions that have had a lot more support in their development than Tauranga has got. And that's probably, unfortunately, a lot to do with our political situation. Winston did all right for us back in the day, but since then we've been solidly one color and somewhat neglected because of that, despite the fact we are one of the fastest growing cities and have been for the last 20 years. So outside of looking for more developer contributions, shifting the rates burden through the differential onto the commercial and industrial sector, and hopefully partnering up with larger organizations like our government. And I know that after the Christchurch rebuild, KiwiSaver was quite interested in investing in New Zealand. So maybe that's an avenue that we can tap into, but we definitely can't keep putting the burden directly on our ratepayers.
So I'm just interested, given that you govern at large, but you represent or champion your ward, when you make a collective decision and it's not necessarily what your own ratepayers are keen on or agree with, how are you going to manage that conflict?
I find a lot of it is just communication and education, like really explaining through the reasons that you are making the decisions that you are. I've based a lot of my current campaign around city mechanics and explaining city mechanics to our people. And then once they start to understand that, a lot of the things in the long-term plan that they potentially had worries about start to be alleviated. I don't feel a lot of the decisions are well communicated. And I think a lot of that can be overcome through active consultation and communication, like being actively in the community, having the councillors themselves presenting the message instead of just sending out surveys and letters explaining what's going on.
So can you explain city mechanics? I'm not sure of that.
Well, by and large, it's basically, well, how cities pay for themselves. Essentially, the long story short is suburbs don't pay for themselves. Quarter acre suburbs have to be subsidized. And in a town, they are subsidized by whatever that town is. It's a mining town, it's a farming town, a forestry town, a port town, or a holiday town. Something's bringing an economy that is essentially subsidizing the suburbs, because you can never charge enough rates. Once you start getting electricity and internet, you can't charge enough rates to cover the cost of the suburbs. When you get into a city, whatever was funding your town suburbs can only be refined so far. You can only refine your port or your forestry so far. You can't discover a new mine, for example. And so then the city has to do city things. And that's essentially economies of scale. And you serve sections of your people for cheaper so that you can then continue to subsidize your quarter acre suburbs. And the fact that we have absolutely no intensity in Tauranga, the fact that we are a whole bunch of quarter acre suburbs, we simply can't afford ourselves anymore. And when you explain that, and then you explain that, well, most cities have a developed CBD full of people, because then you can put the amenities around them and serve them a little bit cheaper than you can your quarter acre suburbs, then a lot of people who were resistant to the long-term plan and the CBD redevelopment suddenly start understanding why we're doing it. And the long-term goal is, to get that intensification to reduce the rates burden on the suburbs.
Right. Excellent. So I'm interested then in your view on the Plan 22 that the Mount is very upset about.
Our city does have to grow and intensify, but I think simply put, it has to do it in the right places first. And the place that can handle it the most is obviously the CBD and the Te Papa strip along Cameron Road. The roading upgrade's already going there. There's a whole bunch of businesses along there that are screaming out for local customers. And that is the most obvious place for us to intensify. The Mount, will need to intensify eventually. I personally don't think modern city planning in New Zealand is there yet for us to intensify the amount and keep its character, keep its flavor. I do think we'll get there. And coupled with that, I don't think Tauranga has the construction capacity to adequately develop all areas at once. So for that specific change, I think the overall definition of what is a town centre and what can be intensified where is fair. I don't think it's really fair to exclude the mount from that. But personally, I would kind of like to see a grandfather clause for that so that we can hold off developing the mount specifically while we focus on getting the other areas that are suitable for development, get the people in there, the ratepayers in there, then we can subsidize the infrastructure in and out of the mount and then we're going to intensify. And then hopefully by then, urban planning will have caught up and that we can keep the character of the mounts and intensify.
A very good example of governing at large while representing the Te Papa Peninsula. So that is exactly what that question was about. So
Thank you.
I'm interested in your reaction to the view that Tauranga is a critical part of New Zealand Inc. and its growth. So we have to think more nationally than locally because what happens here matters. So
Yeah, well, I totally agree. And I've heard some other candidates, trying to downplay us as, a small town or a small city and so on and so forth. But no, to me, we are the fifth largest city. We are the fastest growing, and economically, we are kind of more important than our size dictates simply because we've got a port that influences so much of our imports and exports. So New Zealand Inc. needs Tauranga to be successful. And I think that ultimately played a large part of the reason why we ended up with commissioners, because we just weren't growing into the city that New Zealand needed us to become. We couldn't afford ourselves, as I kind of mentioned before, with the endless suburbs that couldn't pay for themselves. So yeah, Tauranga needed to grow and develop properly, and we need to focus on our role in the wider New Zealand economy and make sure we are achieving that and while simultaneously meeting the needs of our local population. And I think if we do that right, there's a lot of overlap between that. We can grow into a functioning, healthy, flourishing city while contributing to New Zealand Inc. and making our people happy and successful.
So only a few more questions. So you've got through really, really well. So how do you think you'll manage the competing interests of reasonable rates, new funding models, infrastructure debt and deficit? And how will you choose between investing in growth versus rate relief?
It's a tough one, and I'm prepared to take the unpopular stance. We've had rate relief for a long time. We've had a succession of councils and councillors voted in by the people who didn't want their rates going up too much. At a time when, as the fastest growing city in the country over the last 2 decades, we needed to invest in that growth appropriately. It's kind of, if you invest in it appropriately, you get the payoff in the long term. So that's when you can keep your rates lower. But because we've kept them low, we do need to see a slight bump in them. But again, there's only so much that you can take from them before you actually hurting the real economy. People can't spend on, in their local neighborhood if a council's taking all their money. So there has to be a tightrope that we walk. And ultimately, we have to be very successful negotiators, especially with central government, and getting more from them, from the collective of New Zealand to help us catch up. Because as I said before, a lot of other regions that have developed over the last 50, 100 years have been supported by central government in one way or other through various building acts and infrastructure projects in ways that Tauranga really hasn't. And so that's it. We need our developers and our central government to help out our ratepayers, but we need our ratepayers to understand that, they've had it pretty lucky with how they've contributed to the growth of the city. So
as a mayoral candidate and not as a ward candidate, I'm asking you, what experience do you have of managing diverse teams to deliver outcomes?
Well,
leading.
Quite fortunate. All of my roles have been quite diverse. All of my work placements at various private practices and then working through the rest time, the staff of the rest time are very diverse, and the inhabitants of our rest homes are very diverse. So I'm quite fortunate that my entire career and life experiences, I've been lucky to not be surrounded by just people like myself, consistently working under people of other nationalities, other ideologies, and obviously other genders, and that gives you different perspectives.
What about the political differences?
Yeah, obviously I campaigned for office, so for the national election, so I've had to engage with people on a political in a political manner often, and try and ultimately coax them to vote for me. So like beyond that, I would like some more experience of applying the political aspect of it. But I suppose you can only do that when you're successful in getting voted in by your people.
So what do you think the difference is between standing for central government and local government?
I think local government, you can have a much larger impact on your community. Central government, again, it's kind of like another step up in the governance chain. It's a much larger overall picture. Whereas, yeah, in local council, you know, you can go direct to the local communities, direct to the suburbs, and do things that are directly going to influence their life, whether that's giving them amenities that connect them to the community, reducing the congestion that they have to suffer so that they can spend more time with their family and friends. Yeah, I think in local politics, you can really have a lot more of a direct influence in people's lives.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for that interview. You've done really, really well, and I wish you luck for the campaign. And remember to vote, remember to encourage voting, and to share this link through your networks, and to follow us on thepodhub.com. So again, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, most certainly. And thank you very much for having me on. It's been really enjoyable talking through the longer format. And like I sincerely agree. And that's been my message to everyone I've come across. Even if it's not for me, please just vote. We need the voice of Tauranga heard this election. We've had previous turnouts of 30 to 40%. And as a city, we can't afford that. We need all of our people contributing.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Have a good day.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Tune in to the next episode of Know Your Candidate to be informed on who you want to run your city. Got feedback and like to comment your thoughts on the episode? Connect with Know Your Candidate on social. This has been the podhub.com experience. Check out thepodhub.com for other podcasts and how you can even do your own.